Hello, you have found Seeds for Health, where I share information about nutrition, how our bodies work, and general health in servings that are easy to digest with understandable language that provides the facts you need to grow your best version of you. I'm your host, Greg Rocheford. Welcome to the show. Have you ever heard someone say calories in, calories out? What does that really mean in terms of human beings? Consider a laboratory. In that laboratory is an instrument called a bomb calorimeter. A bomb calorimeter takes a substance and burns it and determines how many calories that substance has by the amount of degrees Celsius a volume of water is raised. So if you were to take a piece of wood and burn it, you'd find out that that piece of wood contained 1,000 calories. You can also take a donut and burn that donut and find out that it consumes or contains 1,000 calories. You can take a steak and burn it and find out that it contains 1,000 calories. But how does that work in a human being? Are we supposed to believe that a human being and a bomb calorimeter treat those calories, whether it's a piece of wood, a donut, or a steak, in exactly the same way? Because we're told calories in, calories out. It's not that simple. Let's leave the piece of wood out because I think we all understand that that wouldn't settle very well. But 1,000 calories of a donut. So we eat this donut. The donut is made of fat, the polyunsaturated ick that it's actually boiled in to cook it, the wheat or the flour that is sort of the structure of the donut, and the sugar that goes into that donut and on top of the donut in the form of glaze. So the sugar itself, the glaze, pretty much hits our bloodstreams instantly. We eat it, the sugar breaks up, gets turned into, or broken up from the sucrose into fructose and glucose. It's a disaccharide, sucrose is. Gets broken up, the glucose goes right into our bloodstreams, and it raises insulin instantly. The flour in the donut is broken up by enzymes called amylase, and that amylase breaks the carbohydrates, which are just chains of glucose, breaks off those little pieces of glucose and throws that into our bloodstreams. So insulin is going through the roof, trying to keep glucose at a stable level. We usually have about a teaspoon of glucose in our bloodstreams at any given time. If it raises above that, insulin is sent out to take that glucose and get it out of our bloodstreams and put it into storage. There are two places that our bodies store energy. One is a form of energy called glycogen. Glycogen is another carbohydrate. It's a branched carbohydrate. It's really dense. And that glycogen is stored either in our livers or in our muscles. And those glycogen stores can hold from about 1,800 to 2,000 calories, give or take, given the size of a person. Then the rest of those calories, the rest of that energy, is stored in fat. So all of that sugar, all of that glucose that came from the glaze and from the donut itself is broken up into glucose and is stored. Then there's the fat. So fat has a lot more energy than glucose. Fat per gram has about 9 calories of energy. Glucose has about 4 calories per gram. So already you can see that the fat has a lot more energy. When our glucose stimulates insulin release and all that storage that goes along with that, if we also have fat, like we do with a donut, available, then all that fat energy is also put into circulation and stored. So we're getting a lot of storage of energy in the form of either glycogen or fat. So that's kind of what's happening with that donut. There's other weird things that happen with that kind of stimulating of a spike of insulin. Because our bodies are so efficient at storing, and insulin is so good at doing that, when we eat a bunch of carbohydrates, the insulin takes that glucose and gets it out of our bloodstreams as quickly as possible because it causes all sorts of problems. But suddenly, because all that glucose is then brought out of our bloodstreams and put into storage, our body sees a low energy state and says, wait a minute, I'm hungry again. So then you want to eat more carbohydrates because you think you're starving when actually you're not. You've just stored all that stuff. So that's kind of the weird part of eating carbohydrates. So that's what happens with 1,000 calories of a donut. It gets stored, or it gets used if you're walking around looking for another donut. When you eat a steak, the protein and the fat that are in the steak, neither of those raise insulin. There's some slight rise that can occur with protein and meat. And that could be because the meat contains glycogen. The animal, when it was alive, was storing energy in its meat, and that glycogen, that carbohydrate, may raise insulin a little bit, but not much. Meanwhile, breaking down that protein into its constituent parts of amino acids takes a lot of energy. Just a quick side note, protein requires extra energy to absorb, digest, and process. That increase in energy expenditure is called thermic effect of food. So already that 1,000 calories of steak has been reduced just to digest that protein. So we've already lost calories. So 1,000 calories is no longer even 1,000 calories. Then, as that protein is broken up, it's sent through our bloodstreams and through our bodies to do more protein synthesis and build muscle, repair things. The fat, meanwhile, the high energy fat, is taken by our liver, and since we've only eaten a steak and there is no spike in insulin, our cells are not being instructed to store that energy. So the liver breaks those fats up and uses it for energy. So say we're out walking or hiking or playing a game or looking for another steak. We're simply using that fat as the energy to do those things. There's no instruction to say, store that energy, because insulin is not being raised. So the liver just continues to make energy out of the fat, breaking it up in a process called beta oxidation. Fats are long strings of carbon atoms, and in beta oxidation it takes 2 off of the end of the fat chain, alpha and beta, breaks those off, goes through a process and creates some molecules that are used to create energy, ATP. As that starts to build up, because we're not storing any of that, and if we don't need to use it, the liver starts to create ketones. And those ketones then are used by our brain especially and our other processes in our bodies for energy. Ketones have about the same caloric count, the same caloric amount as glucose, 4 calories per gram. So our body uses those ketones, and our liver then continues making ketones. So what happens then? Well, then those ketones, if they're not used, simply get breathed out, or we pee them out. None of them are being stored. None of that energy is being stored. So, going back then, we've got a donut and we've got a steak, both 1,000 calories. If we were to go to a laboratory, they would be exactly the same, 1,000 calories. But we put them into a human being, and 1,000 calories in a donut creates a much different response than 1,000 calories of a steak. So calories in, calories out really only exists in a laboratory with a bomb calorimeter. If you're talking a human being, human beings are not bomb calorimeters. We're vastly more complicated and beautiful. We are not bomb calorimeters, and calories in, calories out has nothing to do with what we do with those calories. It's completely different. I just had to get that off of my chest because I hear a lot of people talking about calories in, calories out, and they do these diets where I'm going to cut back on my calories. Unless they cut back on their carbohydrates, they're still going to be storing. If a person were to have a diet where they're eating 2,000 calories a day and they want to lose weight, and they cut that back to 1,500 calories, they may actually lose weight because their body is seeing a different energy state, and they may actually start losing some weight. But then their body simply says, well, I'm getting used to this lower calorie thing because we might be starving. There's no food, so I'm going to become more efficient. And now I'm going to survive on only 1,500 calories instead of 2,000 calories. So then the body finds a new homeostasis at a different caloric intake of 1,500 calories instead of 2,000 calories. And now the person starts gaining weight, even though the person is only eating 1,500 calories. You can keep doing that until finally, well, anyone can lose weight if they just stop eating. That's just a fact. But it's a lot more complicated than simply calories. If you were to eat a high caloric intake diet on a keto type diet, that would be a lot of fat and a lot of protein. You wouldn't gain weight because you're not stimulating insulin. Insulin is going to make you store fat. A ketogenic diet, you will always lose weight and get to a very lean weight. If you cut calories or cut carbohydrates rather, that will result in the same sort of situation. You will lose weight because your body is now burning fat for fuel and not storing glucose in the form of fat. I hope a lot of this is making sense, and it's really pointing to what you put into your body. If you limit the amount of glucose and carbohydrates in your diet, you will lose weight. Your liver will take all that fat, wonderful, saturated fat from meat, and turn it into ketones, and either you'll use them or you'll just get rid of them. Saturated fat, we need to go into this on another topic, but saturated fat is not a bad thing to eat. In fact, our bodies store saturated fat for our survival. If we eat too many carbohydrates, those carbohydrates are converted in our livers into saturated fat, and then it's stored as saturated fat. Saturated fat is not bad. We need it to survive, and not eating it because it's scary and bad is not a good thing to do. We need it for our cells. We need it for our joints. We need cholesterol for sex hormones like testosterone and estradiol. We need it for the bile that actually breaks up fat and protein. We need it for energy. There's coenzyme Q or ubiquinol or whatever is also created in this process called the mevalonate pathway, where it creates a whole bunch of things, including cholesterol. And we need that. We need cholesterol. I kind of got off on a tangent there, but anyway, basically the next time you hear somebody say calories in, calories out, you can just shake your head and say, I'm not a bomb calorimeter. Thank you for listening to Seeds for Health. I hope the information that I presented was informative. If so, please hit subscribe. Please also leave comments on how I can improve or topics that you'd like to see covered. Enjoy your journey to better health, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.